That was the first time we had a real serious conversation about adoption, and it was catastrophic for them and end of the world for them, and sat in this room and needed to reassure them that it wasn't something personal against them. And it's unfortunate because I don't think that people should be in that situation of having to reassure their parents of their value.
Thank you for joining us again on Family Twist. Kendall is handling hosting duties on this episode because I was out of town for a few days celebrating our godson's 13th birthday. In this episode, Kendall chats with fellow adoptee Greg Gentry, who also lives in New Hampshire, the live free or die state where Kendall and I also reside. Greg talks about the fact that he's in partial reunion with his birth family, something that continues to be traumatic for him, and also reveals that he didn't find out about being adopted until he was 10 years old. And I know that's something that really bothers Kendall as one who always knew that he was adopted. Greg's adoption discovery at age 10 really rocked his world, so let's let them get right into it.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's a great honor to be here, and I appreciate speaking to somebody who's also in this great state of New Hampshire.
Corey and I were talking about that we think that physically you're the guest who lives the closest to us.
Yeah, I'm in Salem.
I purposefully knew very little about your story. I do know that you were born during the baby scoop era, so we can just go from there. What did you know about your adoption?
I'm trying to decide if I know any more about it as of right now than I did growing up. And I know very little about what actually transpired despite being in reunion for a long time now. I found out I was adopted when I was 10, and it was a question I asked my parents. They said that they actually had told me before at some point, whatever age it was, sufficiently young that it didn't sink in, or maybe the magnitude of it wasn't something I could absorb. So I thought to ask during a TV show I was watching at age 10 and heard the news that, yes, you were adopted. And I remember my whole world shifting, feeling it shift, feeling my connection with my adoptive sisters shift, feeling like I couldn't have appreciated the magnitude of and how big it was going to impact me going forward. And what it really resulted in was feeling this disconnect, unfortunately. I'd sensed something that didn't quite align before finding that out. But once the news came and suddenly it was a reality for me, or trying to absorb it in my young mind, some of my relationships were unfortunately never the same. I just experienced that I was feeling a rift there, and it's never fully closed up again, unfortunately. They never had continuation of the conversation after that. So I grew up the rest of my years never really being engaged about my adoption, never finding out about it, never having details. And the few times I did bring it up, it was an uncomfortable situation, particularly for my mom. And she would get tearful and say, "We've told you all we know." That didn't turn out to be exactly the case. So, yeah.
Was yours a closed adoption?
It was just a domestic infant adoption. It was a closed adoption.
Got it.
In the sense that I still don't have access to my records. I've still never seen my original birth certificate out of California. And I don't have any of my non-identifying information. I've sent away for it twice now to the state of California, including just last month for the second time. So I'm hoping to get some information on the agency, on what happened. It's interesting because these are still conversations, even though my adoptive mother's still alive. I've never felt like I could talk to her about that. Like, I know there's a file maybe somewhere. Even as an adoptee out of the fog, I feel like it would be a hurtful situation to ask for my own information, which is unfortunate. I wish I had nerve to do it.
When I hear stories like yours, it makes me feel so appreciative of the fact that my adoptive parents were so forthcoming. They knew nothing. What they did have, I had my adoption papers when I was 8 is when they set me, well, because I had always known I was adopted. As you get a little bit older, you start saying things like, "Oh gosh, I wonder if I have siblings out there." And my parents, I guess I should have thought that could have hurt their feelings, but I never thought that, and they never made me feel, and I truly don't think I did hurt their feelings. I think that they were very open and understanding about that. I remember vividly when I was that young, they would both say to me, whenever We'll help you in any way we can. We can't imagine how it must feel. They both came from big families themselves. And my mother would say, oh, I bet you do have siblings. It was a positive thing. And I hear so many people who were either told to be quiet or understood that they should be quiet about it.
And they were never unkind about, but because it was an emotional situation, when I did want, the few times I wanted to talk about it, I intuited, okay, this isn't an approachable subject right now. So we never had a serious conversation about it until I found my birth mother in 2006. That was the first time we had a real serious conversation about adoption, and it was catastrophic for them and end of the world for them. I sat in this room and needed to reassure them that it wasn't something personal against them. And it's unfortunate because I don't think that people should be in that situation of having to reassure their parents of their value.
You and I, as the children, we had no control over any of that. It's like we were put in those situations. So I found both sides of my biological family, and they're completely opposite of each other. I feel really accepted by my father's side. I have one great sister and my mother's sister. They're really good to me, but the rest of them wish that I had never been found, want me to go away. I'm excluded. I want to give my birth mother grace, but at the same time, she's never spoken to me, and it's getting close to 7 years. I'm tired of giving her all the excuse. It was such a difficult time in her life. I'm like, she just turned 70. Put your big girl pants on and grow up. When is it time for me to stop being the dirty little secret?
And I know that nobody should ever be in that situation. And it can make a person feel like they doubt the worthiness of their own existence. Do I have a right to be here? I know that's a big question for a lot of adoptees. And when something like that happens, it just feels like it's a supreme invalidation of our existence, really.
Yeah. And one of the more recent things that she said to my sister, her daughter, she said that she feels as if her rights have been violated because I found her. And I've said, wait, so I'm saying this to my sister, who I've said to her, I petitioned the court 3 times. I never got one bit of information through the courts. I found them because of Ancestry.com. So stop changing the narrative, even about the discovery. I don't know if she's just a pathological liar or I don't know. I can't understand why she feels the need to always deflect.
And of course, the advent of the DNA age, the expectation that people had, whether it was something they really thought they were entitled to or not, of anonymity versus privacy, doesn't hold up anymore, does it? Unfortunately, it came to that. People who deserved the right to know who they are finally have a way, many of us, to do that. And it's upset a lot of people, but I honestly, I'm so glad it happened. That's how I was able to find my paternal side. I found my maternal side through a private investigator. I was able to find my paternal side through DNA. And I think that people in our situation are part of this landslide, and in other communities too, right? In the donor conceived community, for example, of we're here now. You're going to pay attention to us, and we do have rights to know these things. And it's not right to keep those bits of information that are so vital to us away from us.
My mother's other son, who definitely wishes I would go away, has not threatened me, but said, you better never utter my name on your podcast. I'm like, A, nobody would know who you are. B, you have a common name. And C, this isn't about you. This is about me.
Yeah.
This is my story.
This is the gatekeeper, right? There's these gatekeepers within families, unfortunately, that keep us from knowing things we have the right to know.
Yeah, and that makes me resentful. I'm like, I'm the one that people still want to lie about almost 54 years later. And I'm the one that's supposed to keep my mouth shut. It's no, I'm not going to.
I wish it was uncommon, but I do hear it as well. Just what you're saying.
A lot. Yeah. And I am I thought, who wouldn't want to find me, right? Who wouldn't want to be excited about this discovery? And boy, was I wrong on my mother's side. But whatever. As a whole, it's a very good discovery. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, I'll take all the positives, but some of those negatives just really piss me off.
It can offset a lot of things for sure.
Just wanted to pause here for 1 minute so you can take a listen to the trailer for our new podcast, Horror Heals, which launches on Friday, September 13th, 2024.
Horror movies are good for mental wellness? It's crazy talk. Afraid not. I, Kendall Austin Stolz, host the Horror Heals podcast with my partner in life and podcasting, Corey Stolz. An aha moment at a horror convention inspired Horror Heals. I saw a young person's trauma and anxiety instantly melt away when a friendly attendee showed some kindness. Both of us experience anxiety and a sense of being outsiders, but we find solace and comfort in horror movies. In fact, when we started dating nearly 20 years ago, we bonded over a mutual love of horror. In the Horror Heals podcast, we interview horror celebrities, artists inspired by horror culture, and fans who understand the healing power of horror and unleashing our inner demons. For depression, PTSD, and trauma, horror movies and horror cons are prescriptions that work. Our gore-loving guests are brave and diverse, but what unites us all is a shared love of ghosts, ghoulies, and goblins. The Horror Heals podcast is available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as our site, horrorheals.com. Take a listen, and you'll understand when someone says, "A scary movie saved my life," they speak the truth. Check out the Horror Heals podcast for monsters, mayhem, and mental wellness.
Have you, when you say you're in reunion, are you connected to both sides of your biological family now?
I am. And I've had a couple falling outs with my birth mother. I'm not currently in reunion specifically with her, but with my half siblings on her side, I am. With her now husband, I am. And even though he's not biologically related to me, he lives in the house with her and he talks to me. She doesn't talk to me now for almost 3 years exactly, pretty close. But he does, and he knows that it's difficult for her. She did tell me enough about my biological father that an adoptee friend back in 2021 was able to make a pretty educated guess on who she thought he was, and turned out it was him. He was deceased, though I found out he was deceased probably in 2007. I thought at the time, because he died pretty young, he died at 32, I think, or 33, that he probably didn't have any other children. That was wrong. He had 5 other boys. When it was confirmed that he was my father and that this family was out there, which of course they were out there, I came from somewhere. It was a big shock to find that all of these siblings existed. And so the reunion I've had with that side has been more with my siblings and my aunts. Out of that, I'm building stronger relationships with a few of them. They were very honest about this. I went into it with a completely different expectation of my maternal reunion, which is that I was thinking I was going to be on Lifetime or something, and all the cameras were going to be there. It was going to be amazing. That was 2007 when I met her in person. But this time, in 2021, when I finally made the connection to my father's side, I was much more tempered about it. And they were honest about that they're not a well-connected family. Some of them didn't even know others of their family were still alive. So they set an expectation that we probably weren't going to be very close. And that turned out true, except for 1 or 2 instances. So it's disappointing in the sense that I wanted all this vibrancy and all these deep connections. And I've got 1 or 2 on each side now out of all the people. I felt like at one point I have all these family members and we're all going to see each other all the time and know each other. And I'm going to move to Texas and live next to my birth mother. I thought I would do that. I had this fantasy in my mind of doing something like that. I would see her hundreds of times with all the years we had left. And now I'm realizing I'll be lucky to see some of these people 2 or 3 more times in my life. And that's the reality of what it really can be like to be in reunion.
Yeah. And I think that's important for people to hear. I joke with my adoptive family that they created expectations for me because they were so close that it was going to be hard for any family to live up. My mother was so close to her siblings and my father was so close to his siblings, and we hung out with them all the time. My dad's siblings were spread out all over the US, but we were on the phone with them when it was expensive to talk on the phone. I joke with them, and I was like, wow, you guys made me think like that's what my biological family would be like. Even my dad's family that I am much closer to than my mom's, my biological father's family, even they think they're normal. They're not what I was expecting. They don't see each other. They don't talk that. It's bizarre to me because that's not the way I grew up. So I'm glad I had those experiences, but I also am continually comparing my current situation
Yeah.
to what
I could see why,
that.
for sure.
Yeah, it's funny because I had so many cousins when I grew up, like through my adoptive family, that it was physically difficult to be close to all of them, but we still made it happen. But now I only have 5 cousins and I rarely even speak to them. The dichotomy is glaring. It's just, it's shocking.
I haven't made any cousin connections yet of any depth at all. And some of them I think don't even know I exist. I've connected with 4 out of 5 of my paternal siblings, connected with both of my maternal siblings. So it seemed like next I wanted to talk to my cousins. I've only actually talked in passing to 3 of them. Now, there's not a lot of them, surprisingly, but I have basically no connection to them. It's so weird to connect with somebody and they find out you exist at that moment and they're just, oh, that's nice. And then you never hear from them again.
I have felt exactly the same way. If I had a long lost cousin that I didn't know about, I'm like, maybe I'm obsessive, but I would want to know about that person and tell me about your life because we physically look a lot like I've never physically looked like anybody. So it's exciting to me.
Yes.
It's just, I will never understand that mindset, but it's almost like I was just late to the party. And so now I'm supposed to go stand in the corner. I've always been the ringleader and I've always been the one who started the party. So it's hard for me to make that work.
I found out adoptee friends, I actually know some of my biological cousins, which blows my mind. And I said, can you get me an in? Can you facilitate an introduction? So there's one of them that was actually working on that for me last year, but it didn't come together.
Hey, you never know.
It's just strange.
Corey and I have busy lives and we have a busy life together. I get that everybody's busy, but in my previous life, you just made things happen. You just jump on the phone and catch up. And that just doesn't happen either. It doesn't seem like it happens on either side of my biological family. It's just weird to me. It's just not what I was hoping for.
I'm just very happy with the few good connections I do have right now. I have a strong one on my paternal side and strong one on my maternal side, and then some lesser ones that I wish were stronger. And then I don't know if you experience this also, but I have to gauge the level of communication. I think to myself, okay, you can only reach out to your sister 3 times this year. When are you going to space them out? How are you going to do this? Because if you do it twice in the same month, you're probably not going to get a response to 2 of the 3 anyway, the times that you do reach out. So how do you not be a pest to somebody or in your own mind be that way? So I have this like quota of times I can reach out to family, and then I feel like, okay, I can't do anymore. I got to back off.
Yep. And I also wasn't used to that mentality either. And I've become the same person. And I also am probably so proud that I'm not going to won't continue to keep reaching out and getting the door slammed in my face. Life is too short. I'm going to focus on those people who want me around and make the effort. And the ones that don't, peace out if you come around, because I'm a great guy and you should want to know me. So it's just, I'm preaching to the choir, I think, though.
I feel it. I feel all of that. I still find myself doing the reaching out, though. That's except in the case now of my birth mother, because the way it ended was pretty painful for me. And then I have wondered, is she even coming back? Is she coming? And she hasn't come back. And then I go, okay. And then you go on these podcasts and you record things. What if she listens to them? Is she going to come back then? I don't know. I play this thing in my head.
Right. Of course. Lost moments are precious. And I don't have it anymore. But for the first probably 3 years after I found my biological family, I had this recurring nightmare and it wasn't always clear, but the moral of the story was something happened to either my birth mother or me, and we never got to meet. I still want to meet her, but my patience for her excuses, it's lessening. Sure. It's almost been 7 years. what are we waiting? If one more person says, oh, she wants to meet you eventually, I'm like, I seriously don't need to hear that anymore. I don't need to hear that. I could get hit by a bus tomorrow. And then would she care? I don't know. Yeah. So you have met all of your biological half siblings.
I've at least spoken to.
Yep. Have you gotten to connect with any of their children?
I did actually. It's interesting, on my father's side, really only a few. So there's 6 boys now, including me, and only 3 of us, I think, had children. So not a lot of kids over on that side, and I haven't met any of them. But on my maternal side, I've met nieces and nephews. And it's interesting because the last time I saw them, I was still in the fog. And so I had this, it's interesting. You come back, you make all these adjustments mentally when you come out of the fog, and you suddenly realize what you were facing. You were looking at people related to you, and you couldn't sense that, you couldn't feel it, you couldn't connect with that feeling. And now I think, wow, I wish I could go back and see them now. They were young. They were obviously younger than 10, probably 8 years and younger at the time. And I think there was 4. That was 2016, the last time I saw them in person. So I have this frozen image of they look like, and I think I'd be shocked to see how they've grown up.
Yeah. Wow. I have to tell you, that has been, of course, I wanted to find everybody, but we found my family in 2017. We moved from San Francisco to 2018, and I'm so glad that we did, in that I've got a local brother and a local sister, and just getting to watch their kids grow has been amazing. A week from today, my brother's son, we're going to his high school graduation party. I remember meeting him, and he was like this, and now he's a man, and we're almost a man. He'll be 18 this month. And getting to know them at that level has been fantastic.
That's great that you were able to do that. Again, is similar to the thought I had, and maybe I'll move to be closer to them. I moved from San Diego all the way over here, thousands of miles, but I wished for that. I'm glad you have. That's something you can experience.
Yeah. It's, I mean, there's still been things we talk about sometimes. Overall, it's been wonderful. And to get to know my biological father in Concord, Mass. So it's, yes, he's here, and then 2 of his other 3 children are here. So it's been fantastic. Great. And for Corey to get to know them too. It's Corey. We often talk about Corey's family on this podcast too. And he's the only child in his family that doesn't live in St. Louis. I joke, St. Louisans, this is a joke, but I always say I help him escape because we lived there together. We moved to San Francisco together. We moved out here together. And he jokes and says he goes back pretty often, but he even says, I don't know if I ever want to live there again, but not because of his family, because we were so close to his family. And it remains a hard thing about not being there because he just, again, having these really good examples of well-adjusted families that seem to get along. And I had this delusional image in my brain about how it was going to be to find my biological family, and things happen. Like, it's just difficult.
It's nice when any part of it goes well for somebody. I never discourage anybody from doing it. I'm always excited when they want to do it. And I never try to say, beware of this or that. But I do know that people sometimes ask for advice on it. And I always hear people say, don't have any expectation. That's so hard. I'm not a person who can have no expectations. But I do say to be prepared that you just won't know what it's going to be like until you do it. And there's no guidebook for doing it. There are now, I think, physical guidebooks for doing it. But they probably on page 1 say, this may not work for you. So, yeah.
And it's funny because I also joke about this with Corey too, that my adoptive mother and dad were so positive about it. Like, oh, honey, when you find them, it's going to, even they helped build up this kind of this glossy image that it's going to be great. And meanwhile, you're hitting your head against the wall for years before you even find people. And then when you find people, your biological mother poops on everything. And it's didn't, I'd love to go back and tell my adoptive parents, you were wrong, but
Uh,
oh, well, it is
yeah,
what it is. To your point, I do encourage everybody. And yes, family relationships are wonderful, but we need it.
right. True. And for somebody who grows up kept, so to say, and they've never confronted what it's like for the first time to see somebody who looks like you, or to never see somebody who looks like you or acts like you. I have this weird gait the way I walk. I never saw anyone walk that way until I was standing next to my brother in Seattle, walking down the street with him. And I went, but somebody moves like I do. Somebody on earth actually does what I do. And I went through life feeling weird, like, oh, something's weird about me. And I hear that all the time from adopt. That first encounter, my first encounter was the birth of my son in 1998. But even then, I was aware of that as a big impact. Just the fact that people who've not gone through the inability to see themselves mirrored in someone, they just can't fully appreciate the impact of that, what that's like. And finally, when you have that connection, like you said, with people that look like me, that think like I do maybe, or have some of the same affinities I do, it's revolutionary for us, I think.
I do think back, you made me think just now of meeting my half brother for the first time. Corey, I stood back and was like physically watching how, gosh, because at that point we'd been together for 12 years and I've watched you for 12 years, but I've never seen anybody with you who had similar or physically look like most of my siblings. It's just bizarre. And I have to frame this still, but I have this wonderful picture of my mother's daughter and my father's son, and we're all together. And it was so cool. I don't know. Talk about something that makes you feel connected. I'm very emotional in general, but just looking at that picture, there's my dad's son and my mom's daughter, and it was surreal. For all three of us, it was overwhelming in a wonderful way. They're so kind to each other. I almost feel like my brother got an extra sister and my sister got an extra brother. They're so warm and wonderful. There are some great things that come out of the discoveries. I hope that I can reconnect with you at some point in the future because I want to see how your story continues to evolve. I hope, of course, if it's healthy, that you can reconnect with your biological mother and that you get more experiences with everybody in the family that you want to. It's just sometimes time.
Finally, I know it's easy to feel like it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And were you about to say something?
I just wanted to say I wish the same for the parts of your discovery that you're still.
I need to continue to find grace for others because I get so caught up in my own story that I don't stop and think, okay, I will never know what it's like to be a 15-year-old girl who gives birth and who was made to give up the baby. You know what I mean? That was a long time. So part of it, okay, I got that for the first 6 years and now it's time to move on.
Yeah.
Again, I'm forcing my beliefs on others sometimes about that, but
I understand. I was in a similar situation too with having a very young birth mother, and I think that still impacts our ability to connect right now.
Some people in my family have said that they thought that my mother is like emotionally stunted and that might never have matured the way that you would expect others would have.
My birth mother was 14 and she stopped school after 9th grade. And my half siblings on her side have said, I don't know what's wrong with her. We don't understand why she's this way. And I think it is what you said. There's this whole side of her that's locked. That's sad. It's very sad, but it also makes it difficult for people in her life to be close to her. And so there's all this pushing and division, and it affected me too.
Yeah.
But I appreciate you sharing that.
And it might never change, you know what I mean? And that's sad for everybody involved, I think, because to your previous point, I get the sense that my mother's husband has always been supportive. If she wanted to connect with me, he was going to support that. That's what my sisters have said. And I have no reason to doubt that. And to me, it's you got that support there, but it's not enough for her, apparently. It's still, she's wounded.
Yeah.
And I get that.
Yeah.
I'd like to help her heal, but she's got to make a step. She's got to make one step in the right direction.
She needs something back. And it's not because they're selfish either. It's just, that's what it takes for a relationship to happen. The back and forth part.
Exactly. It can't all be one-sided. She even said, and I can say this out loud, I think, she said to one of my sisters when we named this podcast Family Twist, she said, "Oh, am I the twist?" It's, oh my God, get off your pedestal. This is my story, lady, mine. Like, no, you're not. Yes, you are, but it was, anyway, I have no patience for that kind of petty, childish behavior. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me. And again, I'd like to have you back on and talk about things that have progressed.
Thank you so much for listening to Greg and Kendall discuss their adoption stories. I think it was actually best that I wasn't on this episode because it allows Kendall and Greg the opportunity to bond and share their similarities, and I think to heal a little bit too. Thanks again for also listening to the trailer for our upcoming podcast, Horror Heals. We feel like there's going to be a little gray area with Family Twist, but we'll talk about that more on a future episode. The Family Twist podcast is produced by How the Cow Ate the Cabbage, LLC, presented by Savoir Faire Marketing Communications, and features original music by Cosmic Afterthought.